Psychology of people who forget names easily. It's a scenario that most of us have experienced, a moment that often triggers a quiet internal panic. You find yourself standing directly in front of someone you've met on at least three, perhaps even four previous occasions, and yet their name has completely vanished from your mind. It's not merely hovering tantalizingly at the tip of your tongue, just out of reach. It's entirely and cleanly absent, as if it was never stored anywhere in your memory banks to begin with. The truly excruciating part of this experience isn't even the forgetting itself. Instead, it's the ensuing 12 seconds of pure improvised theater you are about to perform, subtly angling your body, your gaze darting around, desperately hoping that someone else in the room will say their name first, or that their phone will ring, or that, in a moment of extreme desperation, the building itself might conveniently catch fire. We've all been there, certainly. However, for those individuals who experience this most frequently, who chronically and consistently struggle to recall names, it's rarely a sign of carelessness, rudeness, or a lack of attention. They are almost certainly not as unintelligent or disengaged as they might have silently been led to believe. In fact, there is something very specific happening within their brains, and once you understand this underlying mechanism, you'll never feel the same burden of guilt about it again. Let's begin by dissecting the moment you first meet someone new. Your brain, an incredibly complex and efficient organ, is undertaking an enormous amount of work simultaneously. It's meticulously analyzing their facial expressions, attempting to register their emotional state and decipher their intentions. It's processing the tone of their voice, trying to understand the context of the interaction, and calculating where you stand socially in relation to this individual. Furthermore, it's assessing whether this person seems to like you, and perhaps just as critically, whether you genuinely like them in return. All the while, you are also mentally formulating what you are supposed to say next, rehearsing your responses to maintain the flow of conversation. Your working memory, that crucial short-term holding space in your prefrontal cortex, is essentially juggling a multitude of pieces of information, perhaps as many as 6 distinct elements all at once. It's into this exact moment of intense cognitive chaos, this whirlwind of sensory input and internal processing, that someone extends their hand and presents you with a single arbitrary sound, their name. Hi, I'm Chris. Chris. Okay. But here's the crucial insight. Chris doesn't inherently mean anything. It doesn't readily connect to any pre-existing knowledge, experience, or concept you already possess. It doesn't immediately trigger an image, an emotion, a feeling, or any strong association that would help it anchor itself in your memory. Instead, it simply floats there, isolated and unattached, within a brain that is, quite frankly, far too busy with more pressing matters to effectively babysit such a seemingly inconsequential piece of data. Psychologists have actually identified a specific reason why this phenomenon occurs. Decades ago, fascinating studies were published demonstrating what is now known as the meaningfulness paradox. In one compelling experiment, researchers showed one group of participants a photograph of a person, informing them that this individual worked as a baker by profession. To a separate group, they showed the very same photograph, but told them the person's surname was Baker. Days later, a significant difference in retention was observed. The individuals who learned the occupation remembered it far more easily than the individuals who had learned it as a name. The exact same word, yet a completely different level of retention, purely because the word baker, when associated with a job, immediately activates a rich and expansive web of associations within the mind. You might conjure images of flour dusting a countertop, the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread, the early hours of morning, or the warmth of an oven. As a name, however, it activates virtually nothing. It simply floats there, rootless and unanchored. Names, by their very nature, are often semantically empty. They carry little intrinsic meaning beyond their function as mere identifiers. And your brain, being the incredibly efficient and pragmatic machine that it is, preferentially holds on to things that mean something, that connect to a broader understanding, or that evoke an emotional response. Consider, for instance, a significant life event you might have attended, such as a funeral or a wedding. You likely retain vivid memories of the sensory details, the particular fragrance of the flowers, the unique quality of the silence that permeated the room, who displayed the most profound emotion, or perhaps a specific sentence someone uttered that resonated deeply within your core. Yet, it's highly probable that you do not recall the exact details or wording that was printed on the order of service or in a program. This isn't a flaw in your memory. Rather, your brain made an unconscious, instantaneous decision about what truly mattered in that profound moment. It prioritized the emotional weight, the personal connections, and the overarching human experience, relegating the printed text to a secondary, less memorable status. In essence, names often function as the order of service in social interactions, a functional, perhaps necessary, but ultimately less resonant piece of information. Everything else about a person, their personality, their stories, their quirks, the genuine connection you feel, represents the rich, meaningful event itself, which your brain is far more inclined to commit to long-term memory. Now, we delve into an aspect that might feel a little more personally uncomfortable for some, as it touches upon internal experiences many are reluctant to acknowledge. A significant portion of individuals who chronically forget names are those who tend to be extremely in their own heads during social interactions, though often in an anxious or self-conscious way rather than an arrogant one. While the other person is introducing themselves and extending a hand, these individuals are frequently engaged in an intense internal monologue. Their thoughts might race. Am I maintaining sufficient eye contact? Is my handshake too firm or perhaps too weak? Did I just accidentally interrupt them? What's the appropriate response here? The name, when offered, briefly enters their auditory perception, but then their swirling internal dialogue, their self-assessment and anticipation, effectively bulldozes straight over it, preventing it from truly settling and being processed. This phenomenon is not merely anecdotal. It's a well-documented psychological effect known as the next-in-line effect. Studies conducted decades ago revealed that people waiting to speak in a group, those actively anticipating their own turn to contribute, exhibited a dramatically reduced memory for what the person immediately before them had just said. Their minds, preoccupied with rehearsing their own upcoming contribution, had already mentally moved on, preparing the next thing to say rather than fully absorbing the present information. These individuals are, in essence, constantly editing themselves in real time, fine-tuning their presentation and anticipating future interactions. For people who experience social anxiety, or even just a heightened, hyperactive sense of self-awareness, they are essentially stuck in this next-in-line mode almost permanently. They are rarely fully present in the current moment, always mentally half a step into what comes next, what they need to say, or how they are being perceived. This constant internal preoccupation means that the precise moment a name is actually offered to them, their cognitive resources are already heavily invested elsewhere. If this description resonates with your own experience, it offers a powerful reframe. You may not have a fundamental memory problem in the traditional sense. Instead, you likely have a preoccupation problem. These two distinctions are profoundly different, carrying entirely distinct implications for how you understand yourself and your cognitive processes. Recognizing this can be a significant step towards self acceptance and finding strategies that genuinely address the root cause rather than feeling inadequate about your memory as a whole. It is also vital to acknowledge the perspective of the people on the receiving end of this dynamic, those whose names are consistently forgotten. The emotional sting of being forgotten, especially when it occurs repeatedly, is undeniably real and deeply felt. It would be disingenuous to pretend otherwise. Having your name overlooked, particularly by someone you've met before, often registers as a subtle but unmistakably pointed message. You didn't matter enough for me to remember. That's often the raw, unfiltered emotional experience, even if the intention of the forgetter was entirely benign and unrelated to disrespect. The brain, particularly when processing social cues, doesn't always take the purely rational approach. It interprets social slights, however unintentional, with an emotional resonance that can be hard to shake. The person who forgot your name likely remembers much more about your interaction, perhaps a specific detail you shared about your family, or the particular way you laughed at a joke. They might recall an unusual opinion or a unique perspective you offered that truly stuck with them. They were present in the conversation. They were just not quite present for the specific, seemingly arbitrary name part. This brings us to a crucial point about memory that many people fundamentally misunderstand. It is not, contrary to popular belief, a perfect recording device. Your brain doesn't simply store experiences as a hard drive stores neatly organized files. Instead, it meticulously stores impressions, powerful emotions, recurring patterns, and fragmented pieces of information. Crucially, it prioritizes this data with ruthless efficiency. Information associated with high emotion, stored. Something surprising or unexpected, stored. Data connected to something you already know and understand, stored. But a single arbitrary syllable, a name, handed to you at the exact moment your brain was frantically attempting to process a multitude of social cues and present yourself as a normal, engaged individual in front of a stranger. That's a challenging ask for your memory. It lacks the inherent hooks that make other types of information so much more sticky and memorable. Interestingly, individuals who easily forget names often share another distinct cognitive trait. They tend to be highly associative thinkers. Their memory functions not as a rigid database, but as a rich, sprawling tapestry woven with contexts, narratives, and feelings. They excel at remembering stories, intricate emotional nuances, and the precise expression on someone's face when they articulated something profoundly meaningful. You might ask them what someone was wearing at a party 3 years ago, and they might surprise you with a remarkably detailed description. Yet, if you were to ask them the name of the person standing directly beside them, you might be met with a blank stare. This is because their brain was diligently cataloging everything except the simple, unadorned label. This isn't an inherent flaw or deficiency in their mind. Rather, it represents a particular architectural design of their cognitive system, one that is exceptionally well suited to the art of storytelling, to genuine emotional attunement, and to a type of deep, empathetic listening that makes others feel profoundly understood. Conversely, this very architecture is less optimally equipped for the specific, somewhat mechanical task of holding onto and recalling an arbitrary label under the social pressure of a first introduction. None of this, of course, implies that you shouldn't endeavor to improve your name retention abilities. There are indeed practical, effective strategies that can significantly help. Consciously repeating someone's name back to them immediately after they introduce themselves, "Nice to meet you, Chris," is a powerful technique. Actively connecting their name to a vivid visual image or associating it with a person you already know who shares the same name also works wonders. These methods are effective precisely because you are manually engaging in the associative building process that your brain often bypasses automatically. You are consciously constructing a small but crucial bridge between the arbitrary sound, Chris, and something that already has a firm and established place within your intricate mental landscape. By deliberately creating these connections, you provide the hooks that the brain naturally seeks for memory formation. However, the core message here is to challenge and ultimately dismantle the pervasive shame spiral that often accompanies forgetting names, that quiet, insidious, low-grade belief that such forgetfulness makes you an uncaring person, someone who moves through the world without truly registering or valuing other individuals. That deeply held conviction is fundamentally incorrect. And it's a truth worth articulating clearly and emphatically, because so many people carry this burden silently, without ever pausing to examine its origins or question its validity. You are not absent-minded in a dismissive way, nor are you uncaring. Instead, you are someone whose brain prioritizes information differently, whose cognitive processes can sometimes be hijacked by its own intricate internal weather, and who occasionally struggles with the single, least inherently interesting piece of information about a person: the arbitrary sound their parents assigned them long before they had accomplished a single thing truly worth remembering. The name was always the least of it. What you genuinely remember about people, the authentic substance, the rich texture of who they truly are, their unique spirit, and their stories, that profound understanding remains intact. That meaningful connection has been present, deeply felt, and profoundly retained all along.